Good afternoon, everyone. It's Claire Farrow here. So I'm the Programme Manager at Outsource, looking after a number of our key clients, and I'm also the Diversity and Inclusion Lead. So along with my colleague Rosie, who's also on this call, we look at how to support both candidates who are looking to get back into their career or even start their career, and also our clients in how to attract a more diverse workforce. And one of the things that we're looking at doing is a webinar series. So this is part one of the webinar series, which will cover 6 months, and it's obviously how to write an interview-worthy CV. So I'd like to thank you for joining the call. I'm sure that many more people will dial in as we're talking, but I think it's probably best that we kick off now. So I'm going to hand over to Rosie, who will introduce herself and tell you a bit about Outsource.
I'm Rosie Anderson. I'm the Cyber Recruitment Manager for Outsource UK, and I work along with Claire, and I'm passionate about diversity and inclusion and attracting more people into the industry. As a recruiter, as a recruitment business, we've been going for 27 years now. In the last 2 years, we placed 1,500 people in a role. And we get asked all of the time from either people who are wanting to come back into tech or from graduates who are just starting out in their career as what on earth should I put in my CV? And I've got to be honest, if I had to write a CV myself now, I would be asking myself the exact same questions. So we've decided to put together this webinar series to help answer those questions, but also to get a guest involved who works for a very high profile organisation, Ernst & Young, and to get Natalie's opinion as well. So Natalie, I'd like to introduce Natalie McKenty. She's the experienced hire recruiter for Ernst & Young, but she also gets involved in the returnship programme that EY do. So I'd let Natalie introduce herself. Over to you, Natalie.
Hi, Rosie, and thank you again, Claire and Rosie, for inviting me to the call today. As Rosie said, I'm an experienced hire recruiter at EY. I've been with the organisation, just over a year now, and I'm involved in recruiting for a number of portfolios within our advisory business line. I'm also one of the diversity and inclusion champs, and I'm also involved in the EY Reconnect programme, which is a return to work programme.
So I'd like to kick off by starting to ask you questions, if that's okay, Natalie. First of all, when you're looking at CVs, what's the very first thing that you would look at, or what do you look for in a CV?
I think this is probably different for every recruiter. Certainly for me, I sort of immediately focus to some of the current work experience or recent work experience that they're doing. I think it also depends on the kind of role as well. For, a specific role that requires a particular professional qualification or something like that, that's also the thing that I'm honing in on first to make sure it's there. And then I think just sort of the general skills, achievements to date. I think they're the main things that I would look at first. I don't know if you would agree with that as a recruiter as well.
Yes, I always go straight to job history. So what are they doing now, and start to work backwards. So how have they got into that position? Then I'll look at skills, key skills, technologies, and then I'll look at a profile which tells you more about the person. But I think you're right. I think it's different for an experienced hire than it would be for a graduate or for somebody who was coming back into the workforce. That's probably the area that I have the least experience in. What would you say for somebody who's sort of looking at coming back into the workforce? What would you look for?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for graduates and people that have had perhaps some, a lengthy career break, I'd be looking to see what sort of transferable skills they might have picked up during that time, and perhaps any volunteer work that they've been involved in. For graduates, perhaps any sort of extracurricular activities that they've been involved in, that kind of tell a bit more of a story about about that person, and what kind of transferable skills that they might have for the role.
we always tell our graduates within cyber or within development or within tech, if they have a portfolio of example work that they've done, whether it's been sort of playing around with hackathons or whether it's been creating websites for their friends, maybe to have a link to that, whether it be a GitHub link or whether it be a kind of cyber link or a peer list link or articles that they've written, anything that can sort of showcase who they are, their style, whether that be tech coding style or hacking style or just them as a person, their writing style. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea. It's a great way to showcase some of your experience or what you've done, particularly if you haven't got a whole ton of sort of direct work and employment experience that you can talk about. So, yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay, and then what about CV length? Now, I know this is always a contentious issue depending on how much experience you've got or how long you've been working for, but do you look at CV length or how long a CV is, or is there anything that you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is, a one-size-fits-all. As you said, it depends on where someone is at in their career. I would generally say 2 to 3 pages is probably a good length. But at the same time, someone who is a new graduate might struggle to fill up 2 pages, where someone else who is very experienced and has perhaps had a long contracting work history might really struggle to fit it into 3 pages. So I don't think there is a hard and fast rule on that. I think it's, you need to sort of consider what your experience and making sure that you get everything into it, but realistically, a recruiter or a hiring manager is viewing lots of CVs, probably, only has limited time to sort of read through, and it's important to get the most important points on the CV.
I think if somebody's been working for 30 years in the industry, anything over 10 years, maybe just summarise, just put your dates and where you worked and the role title on one line, just to kind of condense that back half of the CV, because it's still interesting to see how somebody's got to where they are now and where they started out their career. I always like to ask people how they've got into the role that they're doing now. Where did they start? Because I think I don't think anybody's career path is perfectly straight, but it kind of gives you a background for what they've been doing. What do you see in terms of the numbers of CVs for experienced hire? Do you see that people have tailored their CV to the role? Does that help, or do you advise people to have a sort of straight CV? And what would you say?
Yeah, I think tailoring a CV to a role is a really good idea, but I think realistically, these days people will be applying for a lot of jobs, and sometimes it's just not realistic to tailor an individual CV for each role that you're applying for. What I sometimes recommend to people is have perhaps more than one CV to target the different types of roles that you're applying for, rather than have a completely different CV for each one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what about a covering letter? Would you suggest people write a covering letter specific to the role, or do you read them?
Again, I think it depends on the situation of the person. If unless a job advert specifically says you must write a covering letter, I don't usually think they're particularly necessary. I think there's a couple of instances where a covering letter is actually a really useful tool. And one of those is perhaps if you are going through a career change, to explain why you're applying for the role and how your previous career history and skills transfer to that role. Or perhaps if you are a new graduate that hasn't got a lot of experience in the field that you're applying to, again, to explain how your skills transfer and your motivations around the role.
Yeah.
Natalie, hi, it's Claire here. Actually,
Hi,
I've got
Claire.
a question. Hello, I've got a question that somebody has emailed to me that couldn't attend the call, sadly, and it ties in with the relevance to the role, so I thought it was a good time to jump in. They're concerned that from taking some time out, they actually did a role that wasn't relevant in terms of what their career is and what their career aspirations are. It was just sort of a bit of a way to, keep in work and earn some money, and they're worried that that's going to go against them when they're applying for future roles. Can you give some advice on that, please, and whether actually it's useful to have that in there or whether it's better to remove it?
I think that it would still be good to have it in there. I don't think having a role would ever count against somebody. But I think that there is a way that you can write about a role that you have done on your CV in a way that kind of sells yourself and what you achieved in that role and what skills you might have learned in that role. And you can kind of make it a little more relevant to the next role that you're applying for, even though it's in a completely different sort of career or industry.
Okay, so more about sort of looking at the transferable skills, I guess, then.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Rosie, I jumped in there.
No, that's fine. So in terms of transferable skills, what would you say you're looking for? So if I'm a mum and I'm looking to get back after 3 years out, I might have not had time to be volunteering or keeping up to date with technology. What would you say to put on your CV?
I think, even someone that's been a full-time parent or something and going back to work, but there's still a lot of skills that you can illustrate in your CV in terms of, your organisational skills, managing skills, budgeting, what else? I mean, these are a few examples to start with, at least.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on sort of skills you can?
I always say, you're looking after a child at the end of the day. It is life or death. You're keeping them alive. You're keeping your house going. You are, like you say, you are budgeting, you are financing, you're managing your time, you're keeping a house running. These are all transferable skills. And I always find, or I find myself as a working mum, when you're in work, you are the most focused that you can be because you've only got a finite amount of time and you can't take your work home with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're starting out to write a CV, I've always said to people, like a business analyst or a tester or a developer, these are all sort of key technical roles, but they will all have exactly the same roles and responsibilities. So a developer is obviously developing software and looking at source code review. A tester is looking for bugs in software. I always say to explain the role. We know what a developer does, we know what a tester does, but what makes that role different? So what was the size of the team? What was the technology that you were working with? Okay, you were developing software, but what type of software? What was it to do? What was the interactions with other business areas? And to try and explain as though you were explaining to your partner or your friend what you do. So assuming that they know what a developer does, and that has always kind of made things look different to make your CV stand out compared to every other tester CV that talks the same for 10 years, a tester. That's what makes it stand out and makes it more relevant. Or if you had a project deadline of 6 months and the project completed within 4 months, things that would make this stand out and showcase your kind of successes and those key achievements. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I think a CV should really focus on your key achievements and successes, not just the simply emphasis of responsibilities that you've held. I think any hiring manager or person reading the CV wants to know, what you can bring to the team, what you've achieved in a previous role and what you can bring to that organisation. So yeah, I think it's really important to think about what you've achieved, what outcomes there were. Sometimes it helps, I think, sort of go back and look at previous performance evaluations and think about specific feedback that managers and stakeholders have given you, to be able to use that to write about your successes in the CV.
And don't just leave those key. Sorry, I was going to say, don't just leave those successes and key achievements in your career history. Summarise that in your profile or your kind of key summary at the top, and keep reiterating that, because it will make your CV stand out.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Should the key achievements and the successes go into detail in terms of, how much money you saved the business, or how much money you made for the business, or how many people you managed in the team that you were managing? Should it go into that much detail, or is that something that you leave for the interview?
So I think it could do, yes. I think when you're talking about your achievements, it's good to sort of quantify that with figures and numbers and how well you've done. And so yeah, I think that can definitely be included in the CV.
Thank you.
And that's always something when we forward a CV to our customers, we write a summary as well, but that needs to be backed up with what's in your CV. So if your key achievement is this organisation's going through a Splunk implementation and you've completed 7 Splunk implementations at the same time, you've mentored 3 people and brought them up and helped them develop to this point of experience and got them through their certifications, these are things that they're looking for over and above. Normally, they would assume that if you've applied for the role, you've got the experience necessary, and that's showcased in your CV. So if I'm looking for a Splunk consultant, which I am, by the way, so if anyone is listening and is a Splunk consultant, please email me. If you've got that experience, we would assume that's on there, but the key achievements, if I've got 10 CVs that I'm looking at, need to showcase to the hiring manager that these 3 people are the people they'll call through for interview. So that's where you make your CV kind of stand out and pop with what's relevant, whether that be tailoring those relevant achievements to the role or keeping them in your CV, because they're the things that you're proud of and they're the things that you want to showcase. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Something that I come across quite a lot on CVs is that where they talk about the length of time that a candidate's been in a role, it may only have the month or even just the year. So maybe 2016 to 2017. Can you just explain a little bit, please, Natalie, about the importance, or maybe there isn't, of being very specific with length of time in each role?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think is really important to have in the CV, particularly in sort of recent career history as well. I think you can get away with only putting in the years if, say, it was you were there for a long time and it was many years ago. So, if you've got something like you're in a role from 1990 to 1998 or something, then fine, maybe you don't need to write the month. But I think in the more recent career history, you need to sort of demonstrate exactly how long you've been in a role, particularly if it's been sort of less than 2 or 3 years, to show those start and end dates. I've seen quite a few CVs where someone's got the date where it's in the same year, sort of say, 2016 to 2016, and it doesn't really tell me anything. They could have been there for one day. So I think it's really important to kind of illustrate, exactly how long you're in a role and get the months in there as well.
Thank you. Another thing, just on...
You would agree with?
Yeah, I think if you've been somewhere for 10, 15 years and you can put, 2000 to 2015, but when it is shorter and when it is more recent as well, you're looking for any gaps or any inconsistencies in the CVs. Something else that we see sometimes is people get it mixed up, so they might put 10/11 when actually they mean 11/2010. So just checking for those inconsistencies or checking that those dates do marry up. And I know it is hard when it's been some time ago, so if you're unsure, then maybe yes, do put the years if it's a long time ago, but if it's more recent, then keep that up to date. And every time you leave a role or every time you start a role, make sure that you're keeping your CV up to date. It's once you've got your job spec in hand that you've applied for, it's quite easy then just to put the job titles and the dates on to try and keep your memory going of what you've been doing. But inconsistencies or dates is something that we will look at, and particularly for things like organisations where you need to go through a credit check or organisations where you need to go through a security clearance. If those dates are wrong, it can flag up problems which will slow down that process.
Just on the same subject actually, what about if I've worked for the same organisation for, let's say, 10 years, but within that time I've had 3 or 4 different roles? Do I put down that I've just worked at Outsource for the last 10 years, or do I put down each individual role as an individual entry on my CV?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I see that someone has been at a role for a long time, like 10 years or something, I think it's, if they've been promoted throughout that time, I think it's good to demonstrate that on a CV, that you've sort of been promoted to the next level and the next level, and perhaps the earliest role within that organisation, you perhaps don't need to write a lot of detail about. You can just write the specific dates and what the role title was at that time, and then write more about the most recent position you held. But I personally think it's a good idea to sort of show your journey during the organisation.
I'd agree. I would say break it down to maybe your last 3 roles, what you started at and where you've progressed and how that role's changed. Now, it'll probably be easier to write the last 3 years experience, what you've been doing, but then summarising the dates or even the years of where you started and how you got to there.
Thank you.
What do you think for somebody who has no commercial experience then? Maybe they're not a graduate, maybe they're an apprentice, or maybe they're somebody who's returning after a career break. Where would you start if you were having to write a CV in that position, Natalie?
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
I actually think it's probably even before you write a CV, looking at the types of roles that you'd want to do, having a look at the roles that are being advertised that are out there, and maybe even writing a covering letter rather than a CV to say you're looking for your first opportunity, you're returning from a career break, or you're starting out in your career and maybe looking at doing a week's work experience to see if it's something you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of those situations where, a cover letter is a really good thing to use. I think as well, sort of utilising your network, trying to gain some perhaps unpaid work experience, even if it's just sort of shadowing days. Anything sort of immerse yourself as much as you can in the sort of area that you're looking to go to and build up your network and contact further.
What do you guys look for when you're doing your Reconnect days? So do you host events where you get returners in? Is it like an assessment day, or how do you run that programme? Might be useful to mention.
Yeah, so with our EY returners programme, we try to make it as closely aligning to the interview process somebody would undertake if they were, applying for an experienced higher permanent role. So the actual interview process will be quite individual to the role that they're applying for. But what we will do at the start is recruitment will do an initial telephone interview, and And I guess that's not so much sort of interviewing them on, on their sort of former career history and background, but more about finding out about them, what their motivations are, so that we can make sure that we fit them in the right place.
Okay. So if somebody's transferring from the military, I get asked this a lot. So people who are looking to come out of the military, they're conscious that their experience is quite military focused. What would your advice be for somebody like that?
So yeah, I don't have a huge amount of experience with this. We've certainly had a few candidates transferring out of the military. And again, I think it's sort of that transferable skills focus within the CV. I don't know if it's something that you've perhaps had more experience with.
Yeah, military speak tends to be, the CVs tend to first come out in very heavy military speak, so things that make sense to anybody looking for military experience. I tend to tell people to have a look at the job roles that are out there, that are being advertised on the different job boards, and have a look at what you'd want to apply for. So one of the key things that we always see is stakeholder management skills. It's so important. Now, stakeholder management skills are a very fancy word for being able to deal with and communicate with people of all levels. So whether that be for a working mum, whether to be able to communicate to children and to adults and to care workers, or to be able to communicate with the board and technology people and technical people, and be able to translate those requirements. So either working with the business to understand what they need and then put into technical requirements for technical stakeholders, or to be able to work with the board and understand what they need and be able to communicate back risks, so from a technology perspective. And basically being able to decipher and decode is those communication skills, like you say, are probably the most sought after transferable skills. And you don't need to be technical to have these softer skills. And when we're working on sort of returnship programs, these are probably the experiences or the skills that we look for, because you can teach technical skills. It's the softer skills that are needed. Would you agree in terms of soft skills?
Yeah, definitely.
So have we covered career gaps? If somebody's had a career gap, I think it's always
I think
CV.
we briefly sort of went over that, but I think career gaps in the CV, honestly, is probably the most important thing. And I think depending on the length of the career gap, it's probably good just to acknowledge it, even if you're just stating the dates and that you had a career break. Just for the overall, the whole CV, that the dates all marry up with each other.
Yeah.
And, I think if you did something during that career break, like, travelling or volunteering or renovating a property or something like that, or you're a full-time parent, I think you can probably just sort of fill that in one line as well. And if there were sort of specific skills that you picked up during that time, perhaps including those as well. But I think overall just acknowledging the career break or the employment gap is a good thing to do. And I think the worst thing you can do is extend the employment dates of a role before or after to fill in the gap.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst thing.
Because when there's references and when you'll get found out and you're on the back foot then.
Exactly.
Open, transparent, be honest. We understand that people do have career breaks, whether for children, whether for the market, whether for renovating a property, or just because they need a break. It's not going to be seen negatively if you're open and honest about it. So what about for graduates? Sorry, carry on, Claire.
No, I was just going to ask actually about So quite often at the bottom of CVs, and it's something that I remember that I was told a long time ago when I was a student, the section that people tend to include at the bottom, hobbies, is it relevant? Should we still be including hobbies on the bottom of the CV? Or is there something else that we could sort of put down there to make use of the space, bearing in mind that the CV length is quite important?
Mm-hmm.
I
It's one that I guess everybody has different ideas about. I think if you've only got 2 or 3 pages to sell yourself, are your hobbies going to sway the reader to interview you or not? Probably not.
only
I
if
think if you've
they're
got a
relevant,
hobby that
I
isn't
think.
relevant to the role, perhaps.
Yeah, if you're within cyber and your hobbies are CTS events and you've won so many capture the flags, or you like going to conferences and you've been to SANS or B-sides and things like that, and you're passionate about keeping up to date with technology, then yes, put it in there. If it's not relevant, I think. And it kind of depends, like you say, on the length of the CV. If you're a graduate and you haven't got any commercial experience and it's relevant and you are, I'm thinking of a graduate we've recently spoken to, Claire, and they've competed at national level within so many different activities, then yes, that's something that will make you as a graduate stand out and will show that, you know, over and above, you're committed, you work as a team, you're a great team player, you're passionate, you're committed to bettering yourself, or committed and ambitious. Then yes, if you're a graduate, then yes, I would say put it in there. But if you've got a 10-page CV and you've been working for a long time, then I would leave it out.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think if you do include hobbies in your CV, it probably should be within that very last sort of section of the CV, certainly not before, your qualifications and experience.
Thank you. And do I leave my motivations and my reason for applying for the role to the cover sheet, or do I still include that at the opening paragraph of my CV?
I guess it depends if you are writing a covering letter or not. If you're doing a covering letter, do it in that. I think a profile section is good to have at the top of your CV. So if you're not including the covering letter, you can write a couple of sentences within the profile at the start of the CV. That's generally how I would suggest doing it. I don't know what
Yeah, I'd agree. So normally you'd be applying for the similar types of role, and this is where having different types of CV, maybe having 2 or 3 different CVs running, but I would put in there. So if you're looking to get back into work, put in your profile, I'm a working mum now looking to get back into the working environment. I'm looking for XYZ, or I'm passionate about XYZ, and this is what I'm looking for. A kind of summary in there. Or if you're already working within a business and looking out, you've been there for 5-6 years, you're looking for your next promotion opportunity, or you're looking for your fresh challenge and somewhere you can work within the artificial intelligence space because this is what interests me, or I want to be able to transfer my skills of XYZ into a new employer.
Thank you.
And if you're a graduate, put what you're looking for, put what's of interest, if it's a specific industry that you're interested in. But again, back to inconsistencies, if you do have 2 or 3 CVs running, don't send the wrong CV to the wrong role.
Yeah, very true.
That happens a lot. So in terms of top tips then, if you had to summarise your 3 top tips, or however many top tips, if somebody's writing a CV, what would you say then, Natalie?
Top tips. Okay. I think it needs to be a really good opening paragraph that really markets you and sells you to the reader. I think that's a really important thing to have at the beginning, as well as highlighting some of your key achievements and successes. and maybe covering those within your employment history as well. Another top tip is presentation, which I think is really key. Your CV should be, well set out and formatted in the same style and size font. Look professional. Do spelling and grammar checks. You'd be amazed how many CVs I see that have spelling errors in them. Do proofread. If in doubt, ask someone else to proofread as well, just so you've got an extra pair of eyes over it. So yeah, I think they would be my main top tips.
I think just to really stress that one, Natalie, as well, I've had clients reject candidates for roles that require attention to detail because of spelling errors. So because clearly that shows a lack of attention to detail. So it can be make or break for an application, and it would be really silly to lose out on the perfect role just for the sake of an extra 10 minutes proofreading.
Definitely. And I guess one thing we didn't cover is what not to include in the CV as well. We were talking about CV length and making sure it's all relevant. Certainly things like reference details don't need to be on the CV. The employer can ask for them at the appropriate time. You also don't need to include things like your date of birth or marital status or photo or things like that as well.
Yeah, or national insurance number or anything like that.
Yeah,
don't send your passport with your CV. Just thinking about GDPR as it's coming in, and you're right with the references. Don't put those on. Let the employer ask for them at offer stage. I think with the CV length, it's kind of don't make it 10 pages, but try and keep it to, I'd say, 3 to 5 if you've got some experience. So if you're a graduate, aim for 2 to 3 pages of CV. And think how you would explain what you're looking for to your friends or to your partner or to your children, and make sure your CV is that kind of clear and concise and makes sense what you're looking for.
Yep, definitely.
Are there any more questions from the floor, from the other people that are attending, or have we answered those all now?
I think we've answered them all. So I did see that Shola was typing, but I think we've answered her question now, so that's fantastic. And I've covered off the ones that were emailed through to me from people who were unable to attend as well.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for your time. It will be recorded and we'll send this out. But if we haven't got any more questions... Oh, Shola's typing.
Also, thank you so much, Natalie, for your time today. It's been really, really beneficial to have your insights.
No problem at all. Thank you again for inviting me.
And we've answered Shola's question. She's just kindly typed to let us know that, so that's fantastic. Thanks, Shola.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Natalie.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.